At the agency, a few years in, I all of a sudden got migraines that were debilitating where I would pass out. Basically, I was on medical leave. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I would have like violent tremors out of nowhere. So I remained conscious the whole time, but it appeared to be seizures with very severe tremors. So it appeared to be conscious seizures with tremors and passing out from migraines with really the medicine at the time wasn't working, or it would work briefly and then stop working. I would get rebound headaches. So I passed out at a friend's house and I woke up and his hands were over me, floating above my body, and all of my pain was gone. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm doing Reiki." Reiki is a session where I get to connect to the person, sometimes the same person differently every time. And it's this moment of listening to someone's body, listening to their field, listening to them, and really providing transformation and guidance in sort of gentle and safe way as far as they're willing to go at that time. Because different people have different capacities for change, and honestly, sometimes slow change is the best change. I'm at the point where I like fast change, but I've been on this journey for a long time. But Reiki, so that's sort of so somebody lays on a massage table facing up. I play music. I incorporate sound a lot. In my Manhattan office, I use a lot of sound bowls, gong, chimes, rattles, sometimes drumming. Place someone's on the massage table facing up in their street clothes. And I just start by placing symbols into their head and into their heart. And then I just move throughout the body and I listen to the body. And I think of Reiki as a partner dance. Not everyone has experienced partner dance, but a lot of people have. Is that when you're dancing with somebody, you're responding to whatever they're putting out and then moving accordingly.
Hey friends, welcome back to Practically on Purpose, the show where we talk about what happens when high achievers stop trying so hard and start listening to the deeper call. Today's guest is someone who's been walking that path long before it was trendy. Jessica Brodkin has lived many lives in one. MIT-trained engineer, CIA WMD analyst, stand-up comic, intuitive energy healer, and Reiki teacher. I've known Jessica for years. We talk about what happens when your body breaks down under the weight of misalignment, how spiritual awakenings can look a lot like psychosis, and why healing isn't about escaping the pain but turning towards it. Jessica brings the woo and the wisdom, and it's all grounded in science, humor, and deep spiritual discernment. You're going to hear about her journey from government secrets to sacred rituals, her take on intuition versus fear, and even some wild stories about future baby spirits that might give you goosebumps. Whether you're curious about Reiki, navigating a spiritual transition, or just trying to trust your gut more, this one is for you.
Dear Tao, Source and Divine, dear all my spiritual mothers and fathers, dear countless planets, stars, galaxies, universes, dear Mother Earth and all layers of heaven, dear Guan Yin and Christ consciousness, Jesus Christ, dear Shiva, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Kali, Durga, Hanuman, Ganesha, dear the ancestors of Ali, dear Ali's ancestors, dear Ali's ancestral lineages, dear Ali's spiritual lineages, in this and all lifetimes, dear the trees, the winds, the ocean, the druids, dear my ancestral lineages, dear Reiki masters, dear Sensei Takata and Sensei Usui, dear the Zohar, dear all the saints, all the Buddhas, all the angels and archangels, dear my Tao hands, I love you, honor you, and appreciate you. Please offer a Tao hands blessing as appropriate for Ali Canton, for myself, for this podcast, for our spaces, for this podcast episode and all of Ali's episodes. May they reach the people that they need to reach. May our messages be clear. May our conversations flow beautifully and provide what the world needs. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Tao hands blessing starts.
Amen.
Yay. Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. This is such a special conversation for me, and, one that really comes full circle. You and I have known each other for 7, 8 years. I feel like I always say 7, 8. It's probably been more than that, but it's a nice number, at least, to say. And you have just been such a beautiful, loving, wise source of guidance and support in my life. So I'm excited to share space with you virtually and to help some other wonderful people that I care about get to know you a little bit.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be in your life, and I feel mutually supported. And it's been a real honor to just see how you've grown over the years and to grow along with you. and shift and change and evolve and sort of come back home to ourselves in terms of who we really are. And so that's been a really nice experience.
Yes. Yeah. What is it? The Ram Dass quote of like, we're all just walking each other
So they're
home.
home. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have lived what some would call multiple lives. I think that both you and I believe in reincarnation. So we're like, yeah, of course you've lived multiple lives. But in this incarnation, in this embodiment, you've spent time in a few really what seem to be disparate identities. So CIA analyst, comic, energy worker. Can you take us back to the beginning of that journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the journey comes from so early. And I don't think I think it took me a really long time to integrate and to figure out who I was and what my mission was and my place in the world. And even as a kid, I believe that my desire was to impact humanity on a positive and larger scale. And I come from kind of a math, science, engineering family. I ended up in an engineering school where I got recruited by the CIA. And I was an engineering student, but then I quit. And I worked in a couple of labs. So I worked in a genetics lab. I worked in a physics, material science lab. And then I don't think I really felt funny until I left the nest, and which I think is normal. MIT, where I went to undergrad, was a really, really stressful place. There were a lot of mental health challenges all over. We had the second highest suicide rate in the country at the time. I myself was struggling with mental health. I think struggling with mental health a lot until I became a healer. And even then I still had some issues, but they were really, really bad until I became a Reiki healer. I think that's when things kind of evened out for me.
So tell me a little bit about how you ended up at the CIA and what you were doing there.
Yeah, a lot of people have that question. How did I end up there? So I made a one-woman show about how I ended up there and what I did there, as much as I can talk about publicly. But I think when I was 19 years old, 9/11 had not yet happened, and I really, I really wanted to work in either the State Department, the FBI, the CIA. I was looking to do civil service and ideally do it an international way. I mean, FBI is not really, it's not international, it's domestic, but I was interested in the FBI in terms of dealing with human trafficking, which I'm glad I didn't. I don't think I have the stomach to work in the field of human trafficking, but I had the stomach to, at the time, when I was I guess a teenager, early 20s, before I graduated, I was really interested in biological weapons and what WMD. And so I was just really kind of ahead of my time in terms of being interested in bioweapons. But I was interested, I was curious, and I thought that it was like a real international threat. I thought that weapons of mass destruction were an international threat. And then when 9/11 happened, I thought about doing counterterrorism, but counterterrorism was also too dark for me to stomach. And also I didn't want blood on my hands. So I was, I thought about it and I was like, how do we know who we're targeting, if we're targeting the right person? And then in counterterrorism, you're really engaged in a war, like a full on war. And it could be a war behind a desk, which would be in my case, or, there are people on the ground. I could have been on the ground and I had that opportunity, but I did not. I didn't have it in me to do it. And a lot of my friends and colleagues did. But I mostly worked in the WMD space, which was wild because it was at the time when we were in Iraq. So it was historically a wild time to be at the CIA. And it was the first time they kind of opened up the floodgates. They hadn't hired people since the 80s. And then after 9/11, they started hiring a lot. And so I was like 22 years old at the CIA.
And just really, in a pivotal moment in our country's history and in a pivotal moment for the agency.
Pivotal moment in history, pivotal moment for the agency. I don't think I knew who I was. I mean, it makes sense. You're like a kid. I was a kid. I didn't know that I'm someone who can't really function in a bureaucracy, someone who's like deeply creative and intuitive. I did a lot of dance when I was in my 20s, but I didn't become a comic till like a little later, around 28. So it was the other thing that happened while I was at the CIA is that I had a lot of physical and mental breakdowns. And that's actually how I came across Reiki.
Yeah. So tell me about that. What was happening in your health at that time? Physical health, mental health?
I was 26. Okay, so I didn't know what was really wrong with me in my youth. I knew that at MIT I would break down and I would start like tremoring, and I had a lot of anxiety and depression at the time. And but at the agency a few years in, I all of a sudden got migraines that were debilitating where I would pass out. Basically, I was on medical leave. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I would have like violent tremors out of nowhere. So I remained conscious the whole time, but it appeared to be seizures with very severe tremors. So it appeared to be conscious seizures with tremors and passing out from migraines with really the medicine at the time wasn't working, or it would work briefly and then stop working. I would get rebound headaches. So I passed out at a friend's house and I woke up and his hands were over me, floating above my body, and all of my pain was gone. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm doing Reiki." And I was in New York at the time. I was living in DC, obviously, close to the agency. And so moved back. I went back to DC and I started seeing a healer pretty often, like 2 or 3 times a week. And I was just shaking off the table the whole time
And
for years.
was this when your friend was, well, when you passed out and then you saw that your friend was performing Reiki on
Yeah.
you? Had you heard of Reiki
I had
before?
I had not heard of Reiki before. And just for context, this is about 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, 17 years ago.
Wow.
I had not heard of Reiki at all. Yeah.
And did you grow up in a family that was at all open to what we might now call the woo, but even like more alternative health or mysticism?
Yeah, I mean, I come from in a lot of ways, my mom's family their lineage is mystical. So their lineage is they're Kabbalists for many, many years in the mountains of the North Caucasus of Persian descent, as you know. And they've been living there for a really long time and they've been Kabbalists for generations. So my dad's side is a little more traditional. My dad himself is quite mystical, but I wouldn't say that his family is. But he's a really sensitive guy who specifically really loves Chinese medicine, Tai Chi, Qigong. I'm trying to get him back into Qigong and Tai Chi. I think it's really good for him. I think it's really good for seniors and senior men. I think it's really good for them. So my dad, and I think a lot of Russians really love Chinese medicine. I know. They love Chinese medicine. They love alternative medicine. I mean, half of Russia's in Asia, and culturally, they're more open to alternative medicine than Westerners are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, Russia and China are right
Right next to
next
each
to
other.
each other. They share a border, so it would make sense that over millennia there were,
Yeah.
exchanges of ideas and therefore a deeper appreciation. So you were raised in a place where you had been exposed to some ideas that were outside of the quote unquote
Right.
norm.
But they're very like they're engineers, computer programmers, doctor type of people. That's the family on both sides. So they're
Mm,
really, in some ways, they're both. But occupational wise. But if I'm like, "Hey, mom, I see dead people," she'll be like, "Okay, I believe you." So that's better
that's
than
big.
That's a big deal because a lot of little kids, which had a lot of clients who parents bring their young children who see dead people and don't know how to manage or have sensitivities that they don't know how to. That's something that I've done, that I've helped kids with, and that's been, of course, really rewarding. And it's great that their parents bring them here.
Yeah. So let's jump back to, so you're at CIA still. You had this Reiki healing experience. You're starting to get more and more Reiki healing sessions. At what point did you start thinking that this was something that you wanted to develop a more serious relationship with?
So I had, I guess in my youth, two really huge breakdowns. One was at 26 and one was at 30. And the one at 30, I was already a comedian. So after 2 years of Reiki, I left a relationship that wasn't working for me. I finished a master's degree that I never used, but whatever. At least I completed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a comic, and that kind of took over my life. And 2 years later, I had another mental breakdown and I started twitching again. And during that time, I was on partial medical leave. I was extremely depressed. I was initially diagnosed bipolar, which turns out, and I was put on a bunch of meds, which turned out to be an inaccurate um, inaccurate, what's it called?
Like a
It's a
misdiagnosis.
misdiagnosis. Yeah. So the truth is I have or had complex PTSD, which presents as all sorts of things.
Mm.
And during that mental breakdown, I started seeing spirits. I was meditating every day. I was doing yoga all the time. I was eating really well. I was in therapy. I was heavily medicated still. And while I was heavily medicated, my psychiatrist died randomly, not while with
Whoa.
me, but just in general. He passed away. It was replaced with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And this other psychiatrist correctly diagnosed me, took me off all of my meds. It was a really exciting and different experience. And I think, and so I was already sort of around that time when everything broke down, seeing a lot of spirits, seeing a lot of ancestors. Here, I really thought I was schizophrenic. I was scared. I went to the doctor. I was diagnosed to be not schizophrenic, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, that's so reassuring, right?
It is reassuring. I was legitimately concerned. Did I have some spiritual psychosis later in life? I believe I did. But I think that's also part of the journey of somebody who is really sensitive, learning that discernment about what's going on. And being a medium is a weird gig.
Yeah, it's like your whole thing is that you are sensitive to energies that perhaps are not your own, right? So then it makes sense that that could, by conventional medicine, be considered like, oh, yeah, you're schizophrenic. It's like, oh, you're seeing dead people or you're hearing voices in your head or
Yeah.
whatever. And, that's not to say that there isn't legitimate schizophrenia, right?
Sure,
That
of
is
course.
out there. But I have become curious about, it's like, are folks who suffer from schizophrenia also like some of the most extraordinarily sensitive people out there?
Are they not shamans, right?
Yeah. In a different culture, perhaps
Like, are
maybe
they
they would
not
be.
shamans who have been not been protected or trained or taken care of in like a
Mm,
different sort of paradigm?
yeah. Yeah. So, and then let's just jump to the comedy. When did you start? When did comedy sort of like enter the chat, into the conversation?
I think comedy entered the chat. Comedy and theater entered the chat when I was a really little kid. So I think like 5, 8, 9. I was writing comedy sketches at 9. I was writing plays at 9 and 10. So I was doing theater really little. So I think from 5 to like 11 or 12 is when I
So
started.
performance was always a part of it for
Performance
you.
was always a part of my life, and it was a part of the culture also, in terms of I think Russian Jewish culture of the arts and learning instruments. And I wasn't like a ballet person, but that's very antithetical to my nature. But like playing music, performing music was a big part of my life. So I was performing music and dance since I was like 5, and then performing comedy in comedy theater one way or another since I was around that age to a little older. Then puberty came and like destroyed me mentally. And I don't think I started performing comedy again until I was 19, but that was also in college. So I did improv for a little while and started improv again at 25, 26, started stand up at 28. And so I think it's always kind of been there
Mm. Mm-hmm.
in a way, but officially stand up I was just talking to one of my friends who's been doing stand up for 15 years. So we've both been in the stand up comedy space, not consistently, not always, but overall for 15 years. And it's wild to see how comedy is now for people who are entering now versus then, because we feel like Vietnam veterans in terms of what we went through. And it's like now it's Candyland for them. And even when we started, like very few women were doing stand up. And we were like young women
Mm-hmm.
who are just like the sexual harassment was insane.
God, yeah.
The bookers, the venues, and people always say, oh, stand up must be so hard. People think that the hardest part of stand up is telling jokes and performing, and it's not the hardest part. That's the easiest part of stand up. The hardest part of stand up is everything that surrounds it. And
Yeah.
I think that's why I liked doing stand up abroad because I really felt like the culture was really different there and it felt lighter to me.
Mm.
I did a lot of comedy in the UK, but not that much outside of that. But the time will come when I'll do that, and I have friends who do that, and that's when I mean, and to answer your question, you were like, when did you really become a healer?
Yeah.
That started around 33. So 33, a couple of years after that mental breakdown,
Mhm.
my sister was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis,
Mm.
and she was in a lot of pain. I went to my healer who I had been going to for a long time, and I asked him to do distance work on her. we were all living in different cities. It didn't really work. No disrespect to him. He's brilliant and he's been a great guide for many, many years. And then the spirits that I was seeing told me that I could do it. And they showed me how to heal people.
Wow.
And so my first couple of years of healing, I barely had any training. I had like one attunement with no instruction, with no symbols.
So it was like Reiki 1, but essentially just the attunement from
It
it.
was just attunement. My healer took me into the woods, yelled at me about my ego, and then we ate some fruit, and then he gave me an attunement. And there was no training, there was no manual, there was no community. He always answered my questions. So if I had questions and shit hit the fan, he always picked up the phone, which was great.
Yeah.
I don't have the you know what I mean? But so that's why I think teaching Reiki within sort of a system, even if the system is loose, it still is better. And I think that better than whatever I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in
Well,
the
you know
same
what?
way,
Go finish your
I
thought.
guess in the same way with comedy and with jazz comedy and with Reiki. You see, I confused jazz with Reiki, uh, which I call
Makes sense to me.
it makes sense to you. Yeah, it would. Because Reiki is the jazz of healing.
So how about we jump into that? What, for people who don't know, what is Reiki? How would you define Reiki?
It's funny to answer this question because you know you have your definite. Reiki is really it's an energy system where you can remove blockages, and help people on all sorts of levels, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It's sort of like a energy therapy that is more physical than it is mental. So it goes into the physical, the emotional bodies. So Reiki is a Japanese technique that's been around 100 years old, and it's about channeling energy through the hands and through the body and adjusting other people's energy, and people can feel it. And what I love about it also is that there's an enormous amount of growing body of peer-reviewed evidence that it works, that it helps people. And now we have more and more information on exactly how. We don't know the full mechanism on how it works. It's something in the biofield, something physics is going on, but we don't know the exact mechanism. We do know that this is probably more quantum physics related, and it is something that is very gentle, can be done on kids, can be done on cancer patients, can be done. And it's a fairly gentle but also effective approach. And in some ways, it becomes sort of a way of life in terms of clearing yourself, clearing other people. And it's like an actual mechanism of good vibes.
Yeah, I think that that's right. It's like good vibes made manifest in the world. You know, I'm someone who for many years I was resistant to Reiki. I remember one of my best friends from college.
I didn't know that.
I remember my junior year of college, she just kept telling me about Reiki. Her aunt had done Reiki on her. It was a transformative experience for her. And I'll tell you that I was just like, okay, you are totally full of it. Like this is
Yeah.
some cuckoo bananas nonsense.
Yeah.
But you know, her telling me about it planted a seed in my mind. And then there were periods of time in my is where I'd be struggling with different things in my life. And I kept having that like ping, Reiki, go do Reiki. And then I didn't, or I looked it up and like saved a tab of some random
Right.
people and never actually went through with it. And then before I found you, I don't know if I've told you this story. I found like some random Reiki healer that was recommended through someone, and they were seeing people out in Queens.
Okay.
And so I remember traveling from my job, you know, taking the 7, going out to like some random place in Queens. And the healer was like, okay, so when you get to this corner, she's like, you know, I do this out of my home and I feel like really sensitive about welcoming people into my home. So I'll give you the address when you get to Queens. And then I got to Queens and I called her and she never answered. And she just completely ghosted me.
What?
And like I remember thinking like, all right, so maybe I'm not meant to receive Reiki, or maybe, you know, this is all phony baloney. And then
Yeah.
somehow I found you. And, you know, there were a few things that really drew me to your practice. One, you know, logistically, it was right around the corner from my old office. I was like, oh, that's
Right.
great. You know, I don't have to go to Queens and like wait on some random street corner. But then two, just looking at your background, you know, I'm a lawyer, and as someone who's really analytical and reason oriented, it was really exciting to see that this type of healing was offered by someone who shared a similar kind of brain.
Yeah.
And then I'll just remember in that first session, you always like walk into these new things and you're like, all right, is this, especially if you're being ghosted by that lady. I'm like, oh, am I going to find out that this is some other sort of weird scam? And then you started working on me and I felt it immediately. And I think that that's what I end up saying to a lot of people when they're curious about Reiki, or they're like, okay, but how exactly does it work? I usually just say, go in there with an open mind and just notice how you feel and notice what you feel. And we don't necessarily need to debate how it works
Yeah.
if we know that it does work.
Right. Right.
And we're already used to the idea of vibes, right? Like we can all walk into a room and pick up on like, oh, this is a weird place, or like, ooh, this is nice, or like, I feel good here. And I almost feel like that is like the most quotidian or like normal version of Reiki, or of like energy healing, or being in other people's fields and noticing how those fields affect us. And then I think about Reiki as then taking the positive version of that good vibes room and then channeling it and offering it to another person.
I love that. I also used to feel really self-conscious or not understanding, feeling like sort of discombobulated as a person, as somebody who used to work in like laboratories, right? And then the CIA, which was all analytical, and then into the go as far woo as possible. I mean, honestly, I believe I saw spirits when I was a kid. My mom confirmed that because, and I don't fully, I mean, I was little, but I used to yell at my relatives for sitting in certain places because I said that they were sitting on people
Wow.
that weren't there, that they didn't see. I was like, you're sitting on my friends. And so that was like, and they're like, there's nobody here.
And you're like, that's offensive.
That's offensive. And they're like, okay, this otherwise normal kid is saying that. So I think I had a hard time reconciling all of the different parts of myself, including the comedy part. I had a really hard time integrating. And yeah, but now I understand that. And I didn't understand, like, why did I end up in such a institution like MIT and then become a healer? Why was that my path? It's so weird. I feel like a fraud. I feel like a weirdo. I went to an MIT event yesterday for Tech Week. I'm like, why am I here? But then I'm like, oh, no, no, I was supposed to be here. This is exactly right. Like, I'm giving my science brain is still there. And a lot of my clients and students, they have that brain also, not just science brain, logic brain, right?
Yeah.
So they have that sort of academic, and it brings a lot of credibility to a practice and to a world that is sort of outside the norm. I mean, the woo and logic was never supposed to be separated. And I really do believe that magic are things that we just haven't figured out how to measure yet.
Mm.
We used to believe in like thunder gods,
Mm-hmm.
and now we know what thunder is, so
I would even say to an extent, right? I'm like, we have a material explanation
we do.
for thunder, and like maybe the thunder gods are there, are still there
The thing
too.
is, like, maybe the thunder gods are also still there too. Maybe it's both. I don't know. I love the idea of gods, and I'm fascinated by them
Yeah.
and different religions and how we all relate and don't relate and view the world differently.
So let's go back to the Reiki. I'd love to hear, what are your energy sessions like? Like, what is a healing session like for you, with you?
I think that they've evolved a lot over time, and you've been with me for a long time, so I think you've seen that. But the way that I'm and you are also now in the Holy Fire Yusui lineage of Reiki, and Reiki is a session where I get to connect to the person, sometimes the same person differently every time. And it's this moment of listening to someone's body, listening to their field, listening to them, and really providing transformation and guidance in sort of gentle and safe way as far as they're willing to go at that time. Because different people have different capacities for change. And honestly, sometimes slow change is the best change. I'm at the point where I like fast change, but I've been on this journey for a long time. But Reiki, so that's so somebody lays on a massage table facing up. I play music. I incorporate sound a lot. In my Manhattan office, I use a lot of sound bowls, gong, chimes, rattles, sometimes drumming, place someone's on the massage table facing up in their street clothes. And I just start by placing symbols into their head and into their heart. And then I just move throughout the body and I listen to the body. And I think of Reiki as a partner dance. Not everyone has experienced partner dance, but a lot of people have. Is that when you're dancing with somebody, you're responding to whatever they're putting out and then moving accordingly. And so I'm responding to whatever that the person's body or energy needs at that moment. And I'm using whatever from all of the toolkit that I have, which is Reiki, and then incorporates some other modalities as well. I maybe touch more than other people do. I do some cranial work. I also really like the Chinese medicine meridians. So I like acupressure. I studied the meridians. That was really, really fun. As you know, I super love Chinese medicine, and I'm not a Chinese medicine practitioner, but it's very easy to work with the meridian system, work with the chakra system, which is like really well known in the West. But the chakra system's not officially part of Reiki, as you know.
Yeah.
So then I basically work with their body. They adjust, they feel different. I try to, sometimes people cry, sometimes people release a lot, sometimes people just feel better. Sometimes people have really transcendent experiences. So they'll have like kind of like a mini psychedelic experience without the medicine. That happens a lot, and I have some regulars who come in for that experience.
Hmm.
So they'll come once a month to basically have a sober psychedelic session with me.
Wow. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I don't need to go call my dealer and get
I
some
don't need to come.
shrooms. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna call Jessica.
yeah, and then they just come in for that. Well, they can't have it for some reason
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with their medication or the SSRIs or whatever interference they have.
Yeah, you helped me with cord cutting a few times
Yeah.
to people that I had uh unhelpful patterns
Great.
with. And then I feel like you've also provided insight at times into some of the energies that were around me, like hanging out, whether it was ancestors or even current or potential descendants. I don't know if you remember this. In one of our
I do.
first sessions, you predicted that I'd have a son, and I wasn't even like necessarily thinking about having kids. I think I was on like, oh, I'm gonna have like 0 to 1 kids.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're like, I'm sorry, I have to tell you this. And you probably don't do this anymore, but you're like, you're gonna have a son. He's gonna be really good with words, and he's gonna be kind of a weirdo. And I wrote it down. I actually like have it in an Apple Notes because I looked back at it, and that's totally my son.
I felt wild man energy with him, like wild, like this kind of vibe, like this wild man, like little wild guy.
Yeah. And if anyone knows me in real life and knows my son, that is exactly who he is. And then you also, we talked a lot about whether I wanted to have my second. And, I knew that it was going to be a girl, which is like the weirdest thing to say, since it obviously is like from a biological perspective, it's a twin cost. From an energetic perspective, I had been feeling this little girl energy around me for probably a year before I decided to try for my daughter. And I remember talking to you about that and getting the chance to get a little bit of a sense of what that energy was like. Because I'd never, as much as I'm, on this path and into some of the mystical things, I hadn't really felt an energy in a way that felt like as much the potential for incarnation before.
I think that when I've felt people's babies incarnate or attached to the mom before they incarnate, I think that's probably one of the coolest parts of the work. I felt it more with like my colleagues than with my clients. I felt it with a few of my clients, but you can generally, actually, it's probably one of my most famous cases. And she's a writer who's written about this case in particular. She's a famous writer, but she was a very early client. I was like a brand new healer. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a full on witch at the time. It was a really wild experience before I had sort of the container of Reiki. But she came to me after 5 miscarriages. She had just like a mountain of grief, and she already had a child, and she was trying to have a child with her, I guess, I don't know, current husband. And I saw a little star circling her body. It told me it was soul two, and she had gone to a medium a few months prior who called it the same thing. So I called it soul two, and I felt this like a little star orbiting her. So before the kids incarnate, you often feel like I see a little star just orbiting, like a Sputnik around the person. And then I know that the baby's coming because they're often freaking out. And sometimes I think what's hard is when sometimes people want to have a baby and I don't feel the soul. And that's really, that's painful. You know, it's joyful when you feel the soul and they want the soul, but it's painful when, but even then I had a girl, I have a girlfriend who she only had 2 embryos that were healthy. The first embryo didn't stick. She was bugging out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And now, but I saw this kid just full on running around her. So I'm like doing Reiki on her, and I see the spirit of a little boy who is also a nut, different type of nut, but kind of like wild little boy energy.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's one. No, he's going to be 2 soon. So that's like pretty exciting.
That's super exciting. What role do guides or non-physical energies play in helping you conduct your healing sessions? So you talked a little bit about seeing future babies, but what other energies might be in the room?
Oh my God, that's so amazing. That's such a great question. I would say that every healer has their own set of guides. So even if healers will have the same modality, like my colleague and friend Giselle Ravello, we're both Reiki masters in the same lineage, but the people who've gone to us both, we have completely different energy and completely different styles. Just like could not be more yin and yang. I'm super fire and she's super water. And she's very grounded water and I'm fire and air. So we're like just polar opposites in terms of our energy and the way that we work. But they're my guides. So they're guides that, and then there's guides that belong to the person. And there's ancestors that belong to the person. So it feels like a mix of different beings when they're in there. And sometimes I will have a guide who will come in lately who I haven't seen before. They've been coming in like the last few months who've been showing me how to drum.
That's
So I'll
cool.
pick up the drum and then I see a man, indigenous man, and he will say to me, I'm going to show you how to drum and I'm going to drum with you and I'm going to just teach you how to drum. Okay. And I'm like, okay. And then I just start and I just let go as much as possible and I just start drumming. And then, the moment I pick up the drum is because, and the drum that we have in the office is from Ecuador and it's from an indigenous tribe. And, I remember the first time I picked up a drum, I saw sort of a man just like popped up.
Whoa.
And so that's a really beautiful experience because I feel like I'm being led in a way to, help the person. The other thing is that now that I'm teaching more, there are teaching guides and there are beings that come in and assist in Reiki attunements. So I think you were in my first Reiki masterclass. In my second Reiki masterclass, had some really wild people in there and they were like, "Hey, during the attunement, I saw this woman," and I was like, and then they were like, "Shh," and then she just or I saw this dude, and it was like, "Shh," and they just like so there's a lot going on, and I wish that I mean when I reached altered states of consciousness pretty easily,
Mm.
and through breath work, through psychedelics, through just walking around, through teaching Reiki, doing Reiki. I think teaching Reiki is even more mind altering than doing a session.
Why is
I
that?
really
Why do you say that?
during the attunement process feels like I'm on a psychedelic journey. Different levels, but it is like a psychedelic journey. And then afterwards, sometimes people are thrown out of my life,
Whoa.
which is it's a thing. So I'll get into like a big fight that I can't recover from with somebody
Mm.
who I don't expect to leave my life, to suddenly leave my life after I teach sometimes.
Wow.
It's happened like 3 times.
How does that make you feel about teaching? Because it seems like, there's a lot that you're giving of yourself and then, you know, losing that kind of relationship. It might be perceived as a loss.
It's always a loss, but I am okay with the loss at this point. Because maybe the loss is temporary, maybe the loss is forever. I think I'm really in a state of surrender. It doesn't make me want to slow down teaching. I definitely did teach maybe a little too much for my system, a little bit. And so I think that I can handle maybe once a month, maybe twice a month of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time you give so just to explain to the audience, when we teach Reiki, we give attunements. If you're a Reiki master, you are authorized to give attunements and create other Reiki healers. The attunement process is like a group meditation that feels like a mild psychedelic journey. It can feel like that. Sometimes it's just a nap. So everything from nap to psychedelic journey. And you don't know what's going to happen, and every attunement is different. And basically what happens is there's a ritual that we go through and something happens to the person where they are now authorized and able to channel Reiki. channel it at different levels. And the thing is that the process of going to different levels of ability to channel can be also disruptive for the person's life. So it can bring up different issues. Like I had somebody who struggles with addiction, and the addiction cravings got stronger. So I would
Like,
recommend
I
to see
came here to be healed. They're like, I came here for healing. What
Yeah,
gives?
yeah. But I mean, but it's being done in order for the person to be able to channel more. So whatever comes up is for the greatest healing,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's spicy at the time. Because I believe both Reiki and psychedelics are an act of surrender and trust into the highest good of yourself and of others.
Mm.
And Reiki's really gentle, which I love it about it. Gentle and very universal, relatively gentle, unless someone's never faced their trauma, and then it can bring up some darkness, but which is also something that they have to do.
Yeah, I think your message about surrender and surrender is that sort of not doing, or that allowing or going with or being with, paradoxically, is like one of the hardest things for us to learn how to do.
Sure. I mean, surrender is about letting go of control. And people think that if they hold on more, then they're going to achieve their results instead of just like loosening and
Mm.
being. So it's kind of like the Wu Wei. I think surrender is related to Wu Wei, doing, not doing, right?
What is the relationship in your mind between intuition and surrender?
That's a great question and also like a big question, right? You mean for me or for like humanity? I guess it's the same.
Yeah. Start with yourself if you have an answer that makes sense for yourself, and then
The relationship between intuition and surrender. So I have a very close relationship with intuition, and I'm led by my intuition in terms of I can't heal people without intuition. I can't create art without intuition, and I make my decisions primarily from intuition. So if I feel a very strong intuitive hit, I let go and let that curiosity take me where it can. And I use my intuition twofold, one for direction and one for safety. In terms of like, what are my next steps? The intuition tells me. Am I safe with this person? You know, that's a question when you meet new people. Am I safe here? And that's also a place where I use my intuition. So my intuition is my pathway to surrender. So I surrender to my intuition. I trust my intuition at this point, even when it's taken me on some very spicy roads. But then in retrospect, after a long time, the spicy roads make sense.
And how do you know that a message is coming from your intuition versus from ego or fear or internal programming?
That's a great question. Fear feels a certain way. Fear feels, how do I say this? There's two types of fear. There's a fear in the moment of bodily safety. This alley doesn't feel good. I want to cross, you know, the street doesn't feel good. And actually they showed areas where women don't feel safe walking at night actually do have higher crime rates.
Whoa.
So the women's intuition when it comes to this street doesn't feel there's a train station that I'm like, I don't like that train station. And I don't know why nothing's ever happened to me, but I just like cannot go there. There is a correlation is not causation, but you know, there is a correlation. So I think that there's that type of fear. So it's good to realize that that fear is a gift where you're like, I can't go to this venue or I can't be, you know, those types of things. And then there's the fear that like, if you explore this, your life will blow up type of fear. And then that feels like programming because intuition feels calm, even if it's a bad message. It always feels, even if it's like, this isn't going to, you know, this isn't going to last, or this isn't going to work, or this person's not going to be around much longer, or this person is sick, that even the bad news it feels a certain way in the nervous system. And I think that people need to experiment in terms of when their intuition, the relationship with intuition is like is a relationship that you build. And so it's like, oh, my intuition told me this, see what happens with the small things, and then learn to trust and see how it processes further. If that makes any sense.
No, that does. And it actually leads perfectly to my next question. And maybe you already started to answer it is, but what would you say to people who want to access their intuition? So maybe people who are coming from a place of intellect, logic, reason,
Yeah.
and are curious about cultivating a relationship with intuition, but don't really know where to start?
I would ask those people, where do you feel the most insights and aha moments in your life? And there are different ways to access intuition. The simplest, the way that I started was really through meditation and through nature. Walking through nature, cultivating silence. And sometimes another activity that I really like to do is if I have a question for my intuition, write it down somewhere, go to sleep, ask for it to be answered the next day or two, and see when it comes in. And it might come in while you're washing your dishes, while you're walking your dog, while you're doing something kind of basic. So a lot of the times while you're in the shower, a lot of people's intuition comes to them in the shower. Mine definitely does. But the relationship with intuition and the relationship with the self is I like to think of the world, my relationships with beings, with myself, with friends, as sort of like a burgeoning friendship or burgeoning romantic relationship. So with intuition, treat it like a new friend that you met and say, and what do you do with a new friend? You might send them a job application. You might send them an article, a meme. You might invite them to coffee. You might invite them to a walk. You might get them a bar of chocolate. You might do these like small gestures to sort of get to know each other better and to sort of show your open-heartedness to each other. And with intuition, it's the same. It's like, okay, I'm developing a relationship with my intuition. Let's think of my intuition as a separate being. How do I invite my intuition over? By clearing my mind, I'm inviting the intuition into my home. By cleaning my house, I invite the intuition into my home. By walking through nature, I'm inviting the intuition to my home. By journaling, like what do you need to do? And so there's no like direct prescription for do this and your intuition will develop. So let's say 10 things that you can explore and see which one awakens your intuition and then continue to cultivate that more. And the ways that you cultivate it might change over time. And then follow those hunches and see where it leads. And so it's really an early burgeoning relation, or like dating, right? You ask someone out for a drink, then you get dinner, then you go on a trip, whatever,
Yeah.
So you start small.
And what I'm hearing too is that it is possibly less about doing than about receptivity, because it's almost like the intuition is the doing. The intuition is the message or the energy that wants to come in, and there has to be space, whether it's in your mind or if it's in your home or even the like blank page of a journal or something, for that message to be received. And we're not going to like brute force our way
No.
into intuition.
Intuition is creating the space for something to come through and inviting yourself to surrender to receive it.
And then there's also that attitude of playfulness and experimentation when
Yeah.
you're following intuition's lead.
Yeah. I mean, we have the idea of Alice in Wonderland, right? We have Follow the White Rabbit. We have the Matrix, Neo, Follow the White Rabbit. He's picking up the phone and being like, where do I need to go? I'm getting. So one can take the Matrix is an old movie, but one can take the allegory, describe that whole, like, he gets a phone call, he gets information, he gets some sort of hit that he needs to be in a certain place, and he goes there and he meets somebody who changes the course of his life. And so it's like, you can just, instead of saying that somebody just gave you a cell phone, a flip phone to answer, that would just be like an intuitive hit that comes through.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So at this point in your journey, you've been on this healing path for a while now. I'd be curious to hear, what are you learning or unlearning at this point?
I'm unlearning a lot, and you know this, but I've done MDMA with a therapist twice, and once fairly recently. And I, I think that and through basically maybe more microdosing mushrooms, I have really cleared out a lot of my mental models that felt very heavy. And through the experience of healing with people, healing in community, which I experience more in Austin than in New York, healing in relationships, I think that it's important to address the pain in our own families. Sometimes a lot of healers, they come from difficult families or families with, I don't know families without issues. I don't think they
I don't
exist.
think it exists yet.
I don't think it exists. I think the nature of families is issues. So I think that, I've poured so much wisdom and healing into people who are not even my clients, who are like my friends or my colleagues, which was great. But then I'm like, okay, maybe I should pour this into my own biological family instead of the world. And then by healing my family, I heal the world.
Yeah.
I think if you heal one, this is a Kabbalistic principle that if you kill one person, you kill the world. And if you save one person, you save the world. And so it's also that whole idea of connectedness. So I'm unlearning all the mental models that don't work for me. I don't know how else to say that. Maybe that's too vague.
No, that makes sense. What advice would you give to someone who is on the path to discovering deeper meaning and purpose? What would you want them to know?
I want them to know that it's okay to feel a lot of pain. I want them to know that pain is part of being human and that pain is an opportunity to alchemize and to get into a different alignment. And I want them to also embody joy and play in a way that doesn't harm others, because it can harm others if it's not done consciously. And I think we're often harming each other just by accident, but just by being. And that's okay. That's part of life. That's part of samsara. So I want them to know that it's okay that they're hurting and that there is a turning point in every moment of suffering. Every moment of suffering is kind of a boomerang that'll come back and it'll make sense. Then I invite them to walk into their transformation and their icky parts. There's no way out but to face your greatest darkness.
Ooh,
And I
that's
think
powerful.
that something that's difficult for sensitive people, and maybe this is the wrong thing to say, but it is what I really believe. Our world is a world of duality. Our world is a world of amazing pleasure and joy, and of horror and war and murder and everything awful. And I don't like that, but that's the world and in the structure in which we live, and that I accept that we live in a world of both joy and of both monstrosity. And I accept the I don't want it to exist, but I understand that the monstrosity of humanity exists.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
No, I think that that's real because even a path to healing needs to also like recognize what's the ground that we're living on, and I think that we can all hold the aspiration for greater love and peace in the world while recognizing that that is not always and not often the current state of affairs.
Yeah, yeah, it's not. It's not the current state of the affairs, and I think that I want people to, I mean, there's so many like different ways. I want people to have sort of a flexible mind, and people don't really want to have flexible minds in the age of AI, in the age of Instagram, in the age of algorithms that really feed people their own beliefs. They just reinforce their own beliefs. But I really believe in questioning all of your beliefs and all of your assumptions and really learning critical thinking. And I think it's important for spiritual people and spiritual healers, people on the path, to really question, to really learn critical thinking. We don't really value that as a society anymore. People value believing something and taking a stand and thinking that that's going to save. But that's what everyone's doing, and no one's getting saved.
Mm.
The needle isn't being moved into a healthier direction for humanity. We're kind of falling, we're in this season of, I think, falling deeper down the hole. Maybe that's very vague, but that's something I wish for people. I wish for people to have critical thinking. And if you cannot argue the other side's point perfectly, you don't actually understand the situation.
Yes, because I think that very often what we do these days, is like we live in our bubbles and then we like present the straw man version of the other side's arguments, and we don't necessarily even exercise critical thinking about the positions that we hold, right? And seeing like, oh, well, in the best version of the other side's argument, I actually agree with XYZ, or I think so and so might be true. And having a more flexible mindset, not a flexible mindset in that like you're going to go wherever the wind blows, but flexibility in terms of when you're exercising discernment and you need to update your priors, like updating your thinking.
Bayesian updating.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, this was wonderful conversation. Where can people find you, or how can they work with you?
They can find me on my website, which I have been attempting to change for a very long time, called Love and Light Services. They can find me on Instagram at Jessica Brodkin, Brodkin. I have things there. People can message me. And yeah, and I'm working with the office to figure out my new Reiki training dates for the rest of the year. But generally, my offerings are sessions, training, and then some shows.
Got any shows coming up?
I have a bunch this week for Tech Week where we're roasting tech founders, which is really a great
That sounds
joy.
fun.
It's a really great joy. They pitch their companies and we just roast them.
That sounds perfect.
It's a really good time. It's honestly one of the most fun things I do.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you so much.
Jessica. Really
I'm so
appreciate it.
honored. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to Practically on Purpose with Ali Canton. If you're enjoying the show, the best way to support it is to subscribe, leave a review, or forward it to someone else who might need it. You can also follow along or reach out anytime at alicanton.substack.com. I read every note, and it means so much more than you know. Special thanks to Mutual Benefit for the beautiful music that brings us in and out each week. You can find more of their work wherever you listen to music. And until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stop living someone else's success story and step into your own.